This is Real Talk. This is about our third program, or it might be our fourth program. I've lost count. It's the fourth program. Okay, so it's our community newsroom program. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to find out what the community want. We're trying to find out the issues that concern you. We're trying to figure out how to answer the questions about those issues, but we're trying to also find solutions to those issues. And we're trying to do it in a collective manner. So we're going to do this. We bring a panel of experts around the issues that you bring up in the previous meeting. And so in this particular case, we're going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about the power, not just the power of the mayor. We're not necessarily concerned about who's the mayor. We're concerned about how much power they have and how little power and influence the city council has, and which means how little power and influence that we have. And we want to find out why that is, and we want to find out how to change that. And so toward that end tonight, we have several expert guests with us. And because of the story of the mayor, we're going to look at that first, and we're going to look at that and historically and see. And the guy that broke that story is here with us tonight, and that's Luke Broadwater. He's from the Baltimore Sun paper, okay? We also want to look at, after we look at what happened and why we're here, we want to look at what can be done about it. And toward that end, we have two community activists and experts in organizing around resolutions and referendums in the city council to change the charter. So we have Nabia Aziz, and she's the operation director of No Boundary Coalition. She previously was the lead organizer in the Community United, where she organized for Better Budget Baltimore Ballot Initiative. Okay. We also have with us Amanda Di Stefano. Sorry about that, Amanda. All right. Okay. She's a leadership organizer in the United Workers, where she worked on 2 ballot initiatives to establish funds for affordable housing and a trust fund in Baltimore City. And finally, so we can actually find out what's going on over in City Hall, we have with us from District Number 8, Councilman Christopher Barnett. I'm sorry. I know him. I'm just really bad with names, right? Okay. So, but before we start this discussion, I want to let y'all watch a clip that our investigative reporters did, Taya Graham and Stephen Jennings.
At City Hall last week, hand-wringing over a series of scandals involving Mayor Pugh.
This is an opportunity for us to strengthen our democracy. It is an opportunity for us to strengthen the accountability of elected officials. It is an opportunity for the will of the people to gain power in the governance of this city.
The city's legislative body vowing to change the city charter to make the mayor less powerful and the council more accountable.
We're the ones who hear most clearly the voice of the people, and the voice of the people is, we would like to see Baltimore run a little bit differently.
And then later news that the mayor had in fact resigned.
Today, I am submitting my written resignation to the Baltimore City Council. I am sorry for the harm that I have caused to the image of the city of Baltimore and the credibility of the office of the mayor.
It's a corruption scandal for a city that has seen its fair share, but also raises a fundamental question of why Baltimore's government can't function for the people, instead of the private interest and businesses at the root of the current dysfunction. To answer this question, we have to go back and examine the roots of the current scandal.
I went before the academic committee to review the concept of the book, and as you can see with the document, it was accepted as something that they could use.
As a board member of the University of Maryland Medical System, Pugh made inside deals to sell $500,000 worth of books, some of which were never printed.
Let me remind you all that there is no contract, no date specific of delivery, that the book was to be produced.
Part of what made this secretive deal possible was the transformation of the hospital from a public institution to a private charity.
These public hospitals were, in that year of 1984, transferred into private hospitals as if that were going to solve the problem.
Unlike public entities, the hospital system can approve contracts like Pugh's behind closed doors. But that wasn't always the case, and the reason it changed says much about the roots of the current scandal. Jeff Singer is the former president of Healthcare for the Homeless, and he says that the state was forced to privatize the hospital system to access capital from Wall Street and to help insiders profit.
Within the hospitals, we have so much information now about how the nonprofit directors of both University of Maryland Medical Systems and Bayview have feathered their own nests because they have the power to do it.
It was a trend of privatizing public assets that did not end in West Baltimore. In fact, the need to secretly access Wall Street capital was the primary driver of the formation of another quasi-public agency that has also been a source of closed-door deals in the city, the Baltimore Development Corporation. As its former president, Jay Brody, admits, the quasi-public entity allowed the city to make deals with developers outside public purview.
We would be looking at the developer's actual profit and loss statements, not just in the project that he or she was presenting, but literally what his bank account was. Now that's privileged, what I would call privileged information. And yes, I mean, we would discuss a certain amount of things in open session, but we couldn't really discuss that. It wasn't fair.
And prevent the public from learning the details of what the city was giving away.
The Baltimore administrations have given money to people who never asked for it. They've just said, here's a chest full of money. Take as much as you want. Don't worry about the next guy because we're going to fill it back up with the poor people's money.
It was a secret process that former councilman Carl Stokes says led to deals that were far too generous to developers.
Meanwhile, Miss Sally or Mr. Jackson, who's been living in their homes for 40 years, are getting pushed out of the home because they can't pay the outrageous water bill. The property taxes are horrible. Meanwhile, multimillionaire, billionaire developers, not all developers, but the few who have taken advantage of this, are getting basically tax-free money.
And also added fuel to the political economy that recycled pricey tax breaks into campaign donations. A process that ensnared former Mayor Sheila Dixon and led to her ousting from office for accepting gift cards from a developer, which is why the council has introduced a flurry of proposals they hope will break the cycle of corruption that has again tarnished City Hall. A pledge to reform the structure of governance that Singer says must happen to give the majority a voice in how decisions are made.
What is even more helpful is for people to get active, to be in the street as well as in the voting booth, and ordinary people be in charge of Baltimore City.
This is Taya Graham and Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland.
So is this a case of the mayor's office having too much power? What do you think happened?
Well, I can talk a little bit about how the story came about. It started, like many stories do, with a tip or a suggestion. Sometimes you get a tip from someone who wants to remain anonymous, sometimes from someone who's fine to use their name. In this case, it was Senator Jill Carter. Senator Jill Carter called me on a Sunday, and she said, Luke, I have a minority contractor in my district who's having a hard time getting work with the University of Maryland medical system. He thinks that the procurement process is opaque. He thinks it's hard to penetrate. And I get the feeling there's some sort of insider practices going on. Would you mind looking into it? And I said, of course, Senator. Sometimes tips check out and sometimes they don't. And so the next day I contacted the medical system and I asked them for all the names of all the board members who had contracts, how much they were worth, and whether they were competitively bid or not. And they told me, we're not going to give you any information. And so at that point I said, well, okay, game on. And so 2 or 3 days later, I was able to get my hands on the documents. I was flipping through them on Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. Senator Carter had some legislation she had submitted that was going to be heard on a Thursday. And I know I needed to get the story out before the bill hearing. And so I was flipping through the documents and I saw Mayor Catherine Pugh's name in there. And I saw that they had bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of her children's books. And so I called Senator Carter and I said, did you know the mayor was in here? And she said, oh my God, no, I didn't. And so anyway, we published the story and then there was an immediate intense reaction. As you know now, the mayor has resigned. The CEO of the hospital network, a guy who was paid $4.3 million a year, has resigned. There was emergency legislation passed in Annapolis to ban no-bid contracting from the board and to force the entire board off. Just today, the chairman of the board is resigning. So there's been widespread outcry over this, and in fact, I think there's 7 different investigations now between federal, state, and local investigations. So there's been it had a tremendous impact. But to your question about how does the mayor have too much power, and I think that's something everyone here is interested in discussing. We know the mayor has great power in Baltimore. We know that we have a strong mayor system, and we know the mayor really controls the entire budget and also the Board of Estimates, which approves every contract. So that does open up the mayor, I think, uniquely towards businesses wanting to curry favor with her or give her things, or him, or whoever's the mayor. And so you create that situation with the system.
Since this happened, there's been a lot of activity over in the city council. And so there's several proposals that I believe is slated to try to get on the ballot, I believe. Can you tell me what proposals are there in city council right now in terms of advocating reform?
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to share. So there's a number of bills that have been introduced and a few more to come. So the most controversial and talked about has been the bill I introduced, which is expanding already existing council authority for impeachment. That did not include other council members and it did not include the mayor. I also find it important to note that I went down a similar rabbit hole on this one. This is not something that I wanted to work on or thought was something that we'd ever have to research. But once the story broke, and I'm walking my dog, I'm at the grocery store like anybody else, and my constituents are coming up to me asking, what is the council going to do about this? And so out of curiosity, I started to dive into the city charter to see what was possible.
Can you talk a little more on the mic?
Yeah, found what was possible and discovered that the council not only could not impeach the mayor, but also could not impeach other council members. The only thing in the charter was the ability to remove the council president and the comptroller. And there was also not a real clear process, not a lot of language around what that would look like. And so we put in a bill that would not only add the council and the mayor, but also we've added additional provisions to make it as difficult as possible to do any of these things, because it's something that we hope we never have to use, and we want to make sure that the bar is incredibly high to make a decision of that magnitude. Also included in the package of bills that have been introduced in the last 2 meetings give the council the ability to move money in the budget, which right now we only have the authority to cut items in the budget, and then you sort of have this negotiation that occurs to try and figure out where the money goes, but ultimately the mayor decides. There is a provision, a bill in to lower the veto override threshold from 12 votes to 10 votes, which will do a big deal when we talk about the minimum wage. We were very close to overriding the veto of the minimum wage back in 2017, and we're 1 vote short of hitting the existing threshold. But if we would have been able to lower it, we would have actually had the votes to do so. And would have gotten to $15 a lot faster than we are now with the state enabling legislation. There are provisions put in to expand on the types of things that we have to disclose every year. Elected officials and city employees have to disclose financial relationships that we have, businesses that we own, and there's not a lot of penalties associated or accountability associated on making sure that those are submitted on time, that they're easily accessed, that people do them all together. When we saw former Commissioner D'Souza, one of the things that came out of that was that he was not even filing his financial disclosures at all with the city. And that wasn't something that came to light until after the tax issues arose. We are also looking at the Board of Estimates. There hasn't been anything introduced yet, but I do know that there are some of my colleagues who are working on some different ways to change the Board of Estimates, ranging from abolishing it altogether to reducing it in size or adding seats. There's a lot of things that are going to be on the table. We are also, there's bills that have been introduced to expand the authority of the Inspector General, which actually was, the independence of the Inspector General was actually thanks to you all, the voters of Baltimore City. That was a ballot question in November to make that office independent. And the Inspector General plays a very critical role at holding elected officials accountable, holding city agencies accountable through investing fraud, waste, or abuse in city government. And so looking to expand out those powers as well. I think I hit all of them, but I know that there's a lot more to come. And I can tell you that I'm open to other ideas. A few of my constituents have reached out to me about other things that they want us to look at around financial transparency, disclosure transparency, more penalties for not, there's a lot that is going to be on the table. These are all charter amendments, so none of them will be on the ballot until November 2020 if they pass through the council. But we have some amazing organizers here that may be able to help with some groundwork as well in case those provisions aren't able to move forward.
Okay, let me do a follow-up though, because I believe it was you that put in a resolution to take the money out of the election or to do matching funds or something?
Yes, so the voters in November also passed Question H, which was the Baltimore City Fair Election Fund. And so what was passed, and I'll say there's 2 parts. So what was passed was basically creating a fund, because I mentioned earlier that the council can't move money in the budget unless we have a dedicated fund to move it to, like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So it created a fund, it created a board, but the intention is to create a mechanism for people running for office who vow not to take corporate money, labor union money, donations over $150, no big money in politics. And if you agree to that, then there would be a matching fund of public dollars that they would match. So we had this at the state level. Governor Hogan actually used this sort of mechanism. I think the bill I'm going to be working on is a little bit better than that we have at the state. But Governor Hogan used this actual mechanism. Him and I'm blanking on one of the Democratic folks in the primary used this in 2014. It's already exists in Howard County, Montgomery County.
Rich Madaleno, yep, used it as well. And so the idea is that you are taking the influence of big money out of politics so that community leaders, people who come from the ground who may not have these big money connections, have a fair shot and can raise money. Because I can tell you, as a first-time candidate back in 2016, the biggest hurdle and the biggest question mark about the viability of my ability to win and succeed was how much money I could raise. And anyone that's worked on a campaign knows that campaigns can be expensive, ridiculously expensive. I ended up spending in my race close to $80,000.
to run for a council seat. And that was actually on the low end. There were seats in the first district where people were raising over 150. I think 3 candidates went over 100,000 in 2016 just in the first city council district. The mayor's race was over $2 million. And so if we're talking about access, we're talking about influence in the political process and the budget making process and the policy making process, you want to be able to remove that outside influence to the people who can write a $6,000 check. Because as much as, I'll tell you, as much as you as an elected official, you listen to your constituents, you're out there, anyone who follows me on social media knows I'm in alleys all the time, I'm walking, through my communities. But when if someone has that kind of big money, they expect access and they expect an outcome for that. And it's unfortunate. And so the idea with public financing models that have been done all over the country, so it's not a new idea. The idea is that you take away that equation. And I'll share a story. I was quickly. I had a meeting with someone who works in our finance department to talk about, well, how do we fund this? Where does the money come from? And he didn't really understand what I was getting at with the idea behind the bill. But then as he kept talking, he was like, I've been here for multiple administrations, and I can't tell you how many times there have been decisions made in the budget that were due to that administration's concern about pissing somebody off for an upcoming election. So when we talk about making sure that elected officials who are making the decisions to run the city of Baltimore or run any municipality, they should be making the best financial decisions with our tax dollars without any outside influence guiding that decision. It should just be making the best fiscal decision, the best financial decision, the best policy decision. And so the idea behind the Fair Election Fund is to basically remove that from the equation and get us a cohort of candidates who are from the community, who are focused on community work and want to do the right thing for the city of Baltimore.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this question is from Napier. Do you think people are paying attention to what's happening in City Hall after this debacle? Do you think they are asking for reforms or anything?
I hope people are paying attention to what's going on in City Hall. It's imperative that we do. And earlier you asked if the mayor has too much power, and I don't know if the mayor people don't have enough power. And the only way for the people to have enough power or to gain more power is for us to push and to fight for it. So that means we need to be paying attention to what's going on. The Board of Estimates meetings, nobody goes to those meetings. They're very often underattended, but those are open meetings that people should be paying attention to. Money that flows through the city has to go before the Board of Estimates, and those dockets are really, really long. But as citizens, we really have to make sure we're paying attention to what's going on in our city, because at the end of the day, the people who are in office work for us. And if you're paying somebody to work for you, you're giving your tax dollars and all of that, if you go to your job, you better believe your employer is making sure they know what you're doing every day. They're keeping track of your hours. They're making sure that when you're on company time, you're keeping up with the right messaging. So as community members, we don't see ourselves as employers in that same way, but we spend our tax dollars to make sure that people in office are able to address the concerns and the needs of us. So we need to make sure we're doing our due diligence.
Okay. And the mayor's resignation actually did prompt a lot of changes. Obviously, you can see in City Hall, there's been changes. And when you listen to people on the street, you hear the call for the need for changes.
Just about everyone agrees things need to change at City Hall. Some point to the allegations of pay-to-play politics that brought down the mayor. Others say Baltimore's strong mayor system, which grants the top official more power than any similar city, is a recipe for corruption. It'll take amendments to the city charter to reform the system, and they must be directly approved by voters. There's two ways to get charter amendments on the ballot: gather enough signatures or go through the city council. It's worked before. In 2018, 75% of voters said yes to Question H, aimed at getting money out of politics. A recent report found campaign spending in Baltimore is dominated by developers, businesses, PACs, and individuals disproportionately white, male, wealthy, and older than the city's residents overall. The Fair Election Fund was introduced by Councilman Chris Burnett.
Because one of the challenges that we've seen is running for office is particularly expensive and particularly difficult if you don't have the correct connections and know the right people. And we want to change that balance as well, because money in politics is really what we're talking about here.
Burnett is now working on a proposal to raise money for the Fair Election Fund, which kicks off in 2024. Members of the council have introduced 4 new amendments to check the mayor's power. The first would give the council the power to remove a mayor. Currently, the mayor can only be removed after a criminal conviction. The second would create a city administrator to oversee day-to-day operations. A third would reduce the number of votes needed to override a mayor's veto. It's currently 12. The amendment would reduce it to 10 of the council's 15 members. Some say this could help pass progressive legislation, like the $15 minimum wage bill former Mayor Pugh vetoed after pledging to support it on the campaign trail. The fourth would grant the city council the power to add money to the city budget. Right now, the budget is set by the mayor.
In 2017, Baltimore City outpaced several other similarly sized cities in their per capita police spending.
And a lot of people say the city's priorities are out of whack. Too much money on police and not enough on schools, jobs, and helping people stay away from crime.
For every dollar that we spend on policing, we're spending about 51 cents on Baltimore City Public Schools, 15 cents on the Department of Housing and Community Development, 13 cents on Human Services.
Councilman Eric Costello has said he likely won't hold hearings on the proposed charter reforms in the city council until June of 2020, and there's no guarantees these reforms will pass. But citizens also have the power to get amendments on the ballot. You need to collect 10,000 signatures. In 2016, 83% of voters said yes to question J, which said the city must create housing that's affordable to its residents.
One of the things that we learned in the first ballot initiative in 2016 to establish the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was that you need to start as early and as soon as possible.
That's Amanda DiStefano of United Workers, a lead organizer on the campaign.
Getting 10,000 signatures requires you to talk to at least 50,000 people, just being conservative.
Before you can start collecting signatures, you need to get the language approved and create a finance committee and track all spending and report it to the city. Every signature must be from a registered city voter. In 2018, Communities United Better Budget campaign tried giving the council power over the budget, but couldn't get enough signatures. Some, like scholar, activist, and author Lawrence Brown, say it's time for Baltimore to embrace participatory budgeting.
I actually advocate for Baltimore neighborhood reparations. And so as a part of that, 10% of our budget will be allocated towards red line black neighborhoods, and those residents in those neighborhoods, they would be able to come together and decide how the money they get would be spent in their community.
But history has taught us that whatever structural changes take place, nothing is a substitute for mass movements, engaged people who organize and fight for their interests. This is Jessel Noor.
That report has given Amanda's report. The question I was going to ask her was, how hard is this? You did it twice. You were organized and you were successful twice. But take me into the weeds. I mean, what happened? What was the logistics on the ground?
Sure. So I guess I'll start by saying I am part of a broad-based coalition, the Baltimore Housing Roundtable, formerly now the Fair Development Roundtable, that believes in creating a permanently affordable and non-speculative housing sector in Baltimore City. And so we did work on a ballot initiative campaign to amend the city charter and create an affordable housing trust fund back in 2016. As we mentioned in the video, that requires getting 10,000 signatures from registered city voters. That is examined by the Board of Elections once they're submitted in the first week of August. And so you really want to go beyond that 10,000 threshold to leave room for a margin of error. But we were able to create the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and then took up a second ballot initiative campaign. There's a a handful of folks I see in the room that worked on that, so I'm glad to have some friends here. But that was to put funding into the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I can't really I can't say enough how important it is just to have a citywide movement that people are a part of building, that this isn't an effort that I was the leader of or that I was in charge of, but that really this was an effort, a democratic effort of people coming together to make real change and to change the values that are represented in our city and the way that our city spends money on housing. There's lots of strategies I can share, and I suppose I will, as far as what it takes to gather 10,000 signatures. We, over the last years, have worked with hundreds of volunteers, city residents across Baltimore, who've gone out to their community associations, to their churches, to their grocery stores, pretty much any events, any community gathering spaces you could think of. And really, I suppose, the most succinct way to share how you can be successful at a ballot initiative is to have folks consider and brainstorm what are the spaces that I'm in my daily life, and what are the spaces that I have access to, and then really have folks just carry the petitions forward, carry the movement forward, and take that and just make it your mission over the course of however many weeks you have, that wherever you go, you have a bunch of clipboards and a bunch of pens, and that you're just continuously talking with your neighbors, with your friends, with your family, and that there's just getting as many people engaged in the effort as possible. It doesn't have to stop with signing a petition, but that can be a doorway into more folks joining in as well.
Okay, thank you. Tell me, Nabia, if you will, what is it that you think we should be working on as citizens to make these changes? If we were looking forward to putting in a resolution to get, putting in a petition to get a referendum on the 2020 ballot, what would that look like? What would we want?
Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I mean, the budget is definitely a problem. Our city council representatives are supposed to be direct advocates for their constituents. And because they are only committed to one particular district, we can trust them a little bit more to actually address the needs that we have in our individual needs within our communities, right? So the mayor is over the entire city, where city council people are dedicated to one district, and so they can pinpoint and focus on what their constituents need. So if we give more power to the city council to be able to make adjustments in our budget, we're in turn giving more power to ourselves, because we might not be able to come down to City Hall and schedule a meeting with the mayor, but a lot of our city council members, they show up to neighborhood association meetings. They have town halls within the community. They're accessible to you. You can send them an email or go and set up a meeting with them, and it's not a difficult process. And so for me, that's one of the things that I want to see changed with the city budget. And, so we have two opportunities as community members to weigh in and participate in the budgetary process. We can go to Taxpayers Night, hosted by the Board of Estimates, the Mayor's Taxpayers Night, which already passed. And then the second opportunity is to go to City Council's Taxpayer Night. I encourage people to participate in both, but the truth of the matter is, once we get to the City Council's Taxpayers Night, it's really too late. We have to make sure we're being more engaged earlier in the process, that we're reaching out to, in the current system, that we're reaching out to the mayor's office a lot sooner to make sure that she or he is clear on what we need as community members, because the City Council does not have the power to hear our concerns and make a difference. That's how our budget is set up. They can, they have to keep a balanced budget. They can cut things out of the budget, but they can't add things to the budget. So if you go to Taxpayers Night, the City Council hosting, you say, we really, really, really need to take money from here and put it there. They are listening, and they probably agree with you, but but they don't have the power to do it. So the chair of the Judiciary and Legislative Investigations, Eric Costello, has already drew a line in the sand and said that he's going to hold off on having hearings on this new legislation. So we have to make a decision as community members. We can run a ballot initiative by collecting petitions while this process is going on. It's similar to what Amanda and United Workers did for the the Affordable Housing Roundtable. You can run them both at the same time because similar to the public finance, when hearings came, we only had a few days, maybe a couple of weeks to really get people to come, give testimony, and to have our council members be able to make an informed decision on that legislation because the hearings were just too late. We don't have enough time to sit around and wait for those hearings that might be drawn out. So one thing that community members need to do, if you live in Councilman Costello's district, or even if you don't, we really need to put pressure on him to have those hearings a lot sooner for this legislation that would help to change the way that our budget is written. And we might just need to start a ballot initiative right away prior to the election so that we know that whether city council does it for us or not, we can do it for ourselves. And again, I just want people to really be assured in the power that they have. We don't have to wait for city council or the mayor to change our charter. We can do it on our own. And when we collect 10,000 signatures and we get them verified by the Board of Elections, the mayor cannot veto you. She can't. So it's really important for us to participate in those processes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I want to give the audience a chance to ask questions, this experts up here, or make comments, either about the history of the power of the mayor or the things that's going on, or about how we can change that charter. So, okay, I see a question over there. Let's hear it.
My question is, as we as citizens have a responsibility to government, but also government has a responsibility to us. How do we, in fact, know about and be participatory in the meetings of, the Board of Estimates what is their schedule? Where is their schedule publicized? How do we, again, get involved when the information is cut close knit to when and how they behave behind closed doors?
So I don't think it's that close. I mean, I think most people here use the internet. Everything is posted online. BaltimoreCityCouncil.com has the full council schedule. You can sign up for alerts. There is the Charm TV, Channel 25, airs all of the hearings, the Board of Estimates meetings, many of the council meetings. Those are also available on YouTube as well. I think part of, and please don't take this as a shot, but like if there's information that we're in an age that it is not hard to find information. If there was a time where this stuff you probably did have to go down to physically go to City Hall and get schedules, but you can, it's whatever search engine you want to use. Baltimore City Council, the hearings are all available online and are aired. You can also call 311 and be asked to transfer to any council member or ask for all of our phone numbers are on BaltimoreCityCouncil.com, our emails, mailing addresses. People literally write me letters. I write them back letters because I think it's kind of fun that people still do that. But yeah, that's I think, sorry. I'm a millennial here. I was like, wow, people write letters. That's pretty cool. I guess I got to put a stamp on this and send it back. But yeah, I think we are at a time, I mean, almost all the council members are on social media. I know people reach out to me via almost every social media platform. I would agree. I think I'll speak for myself. I keep a pretty open door for people to reach out to me with ideas, with questions, with concerns, with meeting requests. I don't think I've turned one away yet. Obviously I try to use my time for my constituents. So I will ask typically, do you live in my district? If not, I do try to refer that out because there's not a lot I can do and really know about what's happening in other districts. You do kind of get laser focused, but the hearings are public, they're available. I agree, we do need more people coming out. I'll say when there's a hearing that I walk into and it's packed, that sends a message. You have no idea how much of a message that sends when I walk in and it is standing room only. Because we know that you're watching, but I know that people do watch them online as well. I've gotten constituents who said, "Stop chewing your gum." During the hearing, we're watching, and one of those is my grandmother. So there's a way that you can and should end, and I would say that we have a responsibility as citizens of Baltimore to pay attention. I mean, we find time for a lot of things in this country to pay attention to, and I would say your life is much more impacted, your day-to-day life is much more impacted by the decisions that are made or not made by your local government. Not necessarily, I mean, not that you shouldn't pay attention to what Trump is up to or what Congress is up to, but we all have seen a pothole by this point. We've all seen illegal dumping. We've all seen corruption. We've seen what's going on in our police department. And that microscope needs to be on us. When people feel like you're not watching or you're not paying attention, that's when things happen. But when folks are turning out, and there's things that we can do better. I'll be the first to say it. I don't think we should be having hearings at 10 o'clock in the morning. I think we should be in a place that is accessible. There should be childcare in City Hall. I mean, it should not be so hard to get in and access your elected officials. So,
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. I mean, it's good information,
Yeah,
but
I
I,
know.
wa- I want some other questions to be able to get in also.
I heard you say that a lot of people don't attend these public meetings. How often is the information updated online or made available to the public to know exactly the time, the place, and the location of these public meetings?
Every day. So when we have meetings, Monday nights, our council meetings are always Mondays at 5, unless there's something that changes. At those meetings, we announce when every committee chair, so the council is broken up into subcommittees. Every committee chair makes a public announcement as to when those committees are going to take place and if they're going to be aired or not. And then that very next day, they're available online. So if you go on the council's website, you can sign up for email alerts. If there's a particular committee you're interested in or of a bill that you want to track, you'll get email updates, or you can sign up for Legistar alerts and they'll send you all of the committee meetings for that month. So that information is updated regularly. It is not something that is I don't find it particularly hard to find, but I think some people never heard that they should go on BaltimoreCityCouncil.com. So I think from this point forward, everybody in the room at least should be signing up tonight for email updates on when those committees are going to be heard, what the bills are, and make sure you're asking questions if you have some concerns about anything that's before us.
Okay, and I'm going back to police corruption. A Baltimore City police officer out of his jurisdiction in Howard County, plainclothes, pulled a gun on my 16-year-old son about 2 years ago. I've been following the process, and I asked about, are these meetings about public forums, how was the information updated? Because administrative hearings on the police department's website are not kept up to date. He had a hearing on April the 2nd. I went and it had been canceled. The information is posted in January, and it went from January, February, March, April. Nothing about it had been updated on the website. I called around. They couldn't tell me who was supposed to update it. A guy is supposed to update it. We send them information to a guy, and they're supposed to keep it updated. So when people say things like the public isn't showing up, are we certain that the public is fully informed and aware of where these things are supposed to happen? Because again, I've been following the process for 18 months for this officer to be held accountable. So when things like this happen and all of this attention is directed around the mayor, we tend to forget that it's not just the mayor. It's other entities involved that are having issue with transparency. Now, the consent decree, to me, is just a book of words that is begging the police department to go back to following the law, which is utterly ridiculous to me. So when people keep saying to me, you're so unique because you've been at this so long, no. There are other people out here that are just as interested in the process, but the process is not clear. It is very misinforming, and it is discouraging. So after a while, you're just so tired that you give up. I will not give up. I want this officer held accountable, and we cannot just keep focusing on one broken part of the system. Several parts of the system are broken. So how do we get to making these systems work, and not just for the people sitting in office, but for the people who pay their salary, who are out here every day trying to make a living, who are out here trying to supply for their families and be productive members of society? My son didn't ask for the police to pull a gun on him, but he's still on payroll. and he is still fighting to keep his job. So I'm just trying to figure out, let's be mindful when we say that these things are made of public information and people just aren't showing up. There's no one in the room. Are we sure that people know what time to get in the room?
So and you made an excellent point. One thing I'll point out is that the Baltimore Police Department is not a city agency. The Baltimore Police Department has been a state agency since the Civil War, and I'm not trying to pass the buck on that, but the council, if the council had local control over the police department, we could pass legislation that requires additional postings or additional transparency on when these hearings are. The state delegation denied legislation just this term for like at least 4 sessions in a row to return local control over the police department to the city council and the mayor. And that was a resolution that the full council supported. I'm not gonna speak for all my colleagues. I want more transparency. I want more accountability. I want more control in the budget, because the difficult part is the things that people really care about, the police, the schools, the budget, are all things that as an elected official, as a council member, I can't do anything about. And so we should be held accountable for it, but so should our state elected officials as well. And the fact that the Hopkins police bill made it through, but local control did not, speaks volumes for the priorities of the Maryland General Assembly. And I know I'm gonna catch heat for that, but that is the truth.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just want to add that y'all aren't crazy. The system is not as clear as it needs to be. If you have to miss work or miss school in order to go to a council meeting or a hearing, that's a problem. Or battle traffic during rush hour if you have a car, or try to figure out how to get bus fare to get down. I don't have cable at home. I don't get Charm City television. So if I wanted to go home and watch it, I wouldn't have access to it. In Baltimore, a lot of our homes do not have internet access. So telling people to just get on the computer and figure it out, that's not an option for a lot of community members either. So what the answer to your question is, community members, we have to organize. And that can be, organizing to go down to city council and demonstrate, but it also can be organizing within your community and say, hey, Miss Sally, I know that you don't have a job, you're retired. Can you be the person who goes to the council meetings and then comes back and reports to us on the weekend when we're off work? It can be, saying that we're gonna all watch, somebody will stay behind and watch the kids so that more people can have access and be able to go to the meetings. But to sit here and say that the process is clear and open for everybody, it's not the truth. I work with young people, and my students, they can't miss school to go to a meeting. When they get home, their cell phones don't work because they don't have internet access and their cell phones are turned off. They're using Wi-Fi when and where they can, but we really do need to do more. And the only way it's gonna happen is if we as community members organize and demand the things that we need for our livelihoods to be addressed.
Thank you. I want to get back to Councilman Costello. What gives him the authority to announce this far in advance that he's not planning to hold any hearings until sometimes next year? And what can be done about that?
So I think to address the point that you all are making about access, the committee chair people control when hearings are heard. So I want to go back and say I'm not saying it was easy or that this is an easily accessible thing. I was just trying to point out that a lot of us do use social media. A lot of us do have access to the internet and the stuff is there, but it can be easier for sure. I agree with that. But to your question, every bill is assigned to a committee. The committee chairs decide when the bills are heard or if they get a hearing at all. So there's also the option that the chairperson for any committee could say that bill is never getting a public hearing, and there's nothing in the city charter that says they can't do that. And so yes, that's the short answer is the council is divided by committees. The committees decide when and where bills are heard or if they're heard at all.
If I could jump in.
Just to comment on that, couldn't the full council, if this persisted for some time, draft the bill out of committee?
No. So a bill that I think you're referring to something that's occurred before where the petitions are pulled back to the full council. That's only if a bill has been heard already. So if it hasn't had a public hearing, so you can have a bill that gets a public hearing that doesn't get voted on. And if that occurs, then the full council can pull the bill out of the committee and vote on it that way. But it has to have a hearing first. So one of the tactics that chair people will use is by not giving it a public hearing at all, because then we can't petition it out of committee.
How about now that there's a new city council president, rescinding your bill, introducing it again, and then allow the new city council president to assign it to a different committee?
That's possible. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a solution, but you got something to add?
Oh,
Just some ideas here.
okay, yeah. So I was just going to add to your question. I recently learned, actually just last week, that the council president, we do have a new one as of yesterday, is able to recall legislation from committee as well. And you can fact check me if if the legislation hadn't been heard within 6 months. And so that is something that I suppose we'll have to wait 6 months to do.
Well, to be clear, a recall is basically killing the bill. It would need to be reintroduced, and there's still no guarantee that the council president then wouldn't put it right back into the same committee that you waited 6 months for it to get out of. And the committee chairs, I guess there may be more questions. The committee chairs, the committee chair membership, the membership of committees are all decided by the council president.
Okay, and let me just say, obviously, that sounds like one of those things that should be on the referendum. Take that power away from that chairman to not have public hearings. That's one of the things that we could do. We could do that, and we could put it to the citizens of Baltimore, and they could vote on it. And then there'll be no more secret or ducking the public's concern.
Can I add one more solution possibly?
Yes.
So one of the other things that can be done, and we're having an election coming up, as candidates, do they support changing the council rules? Because the council rules lay out this process, and they're voted on the very first meeting of the term. You can't change them after that. And so one of the challenges that we've had is that if bills don't get a hearing, they die. Well, there's nothing saying that we can't change the council rules so that every bill at least gets a hearing. So it may not get a vote, but once it gets a hearing, then it can be pulled out of committee back to the full council. And so and I can tell you there's some open seats across the city, and there's been folks who are running for office who reached out to me to ask my support. I'm asking that question. Not that I'm being presumptuous that I'm going to win my election. I still got to run too. But if I get back, I can tell you that's something I'm going to try and change, is that every bill, and it's just a democratic process. The bills should not be being heard by the public, because when you have a public hearing, that's the only opportunity in committee that the public has to give commentary, to give testimony. And that should be something that we do for every piece of legislation should be heard.
Okay. Another question in the back.
Well, I just want to say that change has been prompted long before now. It's just that it's been ignored by the very people that we elect to office. I just think that when you say the power is in the people, it is. It's in ordinary people. But because we're ignored, nothing changes. We just continue to have conversations. But I think we need to put our time into making the words we speak into action. I do. And until you do this on a community level and you respect community entities and the work that we do, we on the front line, you ignore us and you make like the things we say don't count and don't matter. And yes, they do. I pay my taxes, so I know I matter. And I think that everybody in this room should matter, but especially at the community level. It doesn't make sense. It is downright disrespectful.
After the petition of 10,000 votes, once the board receives it, they can't reject it, right? I mean, it have to go after that. The board have to vote on it, right?
No. If you collect petition signatures?
Yes.
Yes. So after you collect 10,000 verified petition
Talking to the mic.
After you collect your 10,000 verified petition signatures, it goes to the ballot. It goes straight to the ballot for the community to vote on. We don't have to get permission from the mayor. We don't have to get permission from city council. If we, as a community, collect our signatures, it goes straight to the ballot for us to vote on in the next election.
Let me just add something to that, because, and I heard somebody say that don't go for 10,000, go for 12, 13,000, because what they do is they scrutinize those signatures and they might knock off 2,000 of them as being ineligible.
Why go for 10,000, not my 5? I mean, if it's a great issue, I mean, they give you impossible numbers to achieve. I mean, if it's a justifiable cause, why not 5,000 votes?
Well, you can answer that better because I can't. I don't know why they have that number there.
Yeah, 10,000 signatures is the amount that's required by the Board of Elections. That might,
Because it's hard to reach 10,000, or
is it hard? Yeah.
so if they would lower if it's a just cause, why 10,000? Because it's so difficult to get 10,000, but 5 is so easy, or 7.
Yeah, I think.
The system is made just for you to fail.
And I know other counties across the state, it's actually a percentage of the population rather than the 10,000 number. Our director of
the voting population or
Same.
the national population? Which the voting population or the whole population? Which one?
Sorry, did you say it's a?
You have the voting population, then you have people who just don't vote. So which
Yeah.
one? Is it
It's has to be registered voters.
I mean, I'm talking about you got people who just don't vote. I mean, they're registered but just don't vote.
Yeah. Oh, that's something that I encountered quite a lot actually over the last summer. Was folks are like, "Well, I'm registered, but I don't vote." I said, "That's okay. If you're registered to vote, you can sign. If you don't have to vote in the upcoming election or the previous election or at all."
And one more question: before the mail scandal, pretty much the city council was like quiet. I mean, y'all on Facebook all the time. Now, before, you still had the problems of the city, but nobody said nothing. And so this broke
I'm gonna
out,
have to push back, brother.
and-
That is not true.
Wait, I'm not talking about you personally, but
Okay.
we're talking about the whole
You said
city
the city council. I'm on the city council.
Okay, like I said, now y'all want to get in the forefront. Everybody trying to cover stuff up now. Everybody want to be on the spotlight. But before that, nobody saw you, nobody heard about y'all. Y'all didn't do no work. Y'all didn't.
We didn't do any work. Okay.
I mean, what work
Okay.
we did?
All right. Wait. Okay. All right. Okay. I hear you.
Sir, can I push back on that? Because when I first came into office,
okay,
and
go ahead.
I came in January 2017, we walked into a $130 million budget deficit in the school system. We had a MTA that had cut bus passes for young people. We had over 300 murders. We had a $15 minimum wage that was vetoed. And we had a budget that did not reflect the priorities of the city of Baltimore. For the first time in over 30 years, the city council voted 15-0 to strike down the mayor's budget, something that had not been done in a generation. And you can say that's not a big deal if you want, sir, but that is absolutely true. We cut out the budget department. We cut off we went down the mayor's priorities one by one and voted to remove all of those things. The only power we had was cutting, and we cut the heck out of that budget until we got more money for schools. We held a bake sale for buses to make sure that our young people could get the S pass, the student bus pass. We did literally a bake sale at Dunbar High School. Over 500 people came out to that. And we went after the MTA. We went after the Ravens because the same amount of money that it would have took to restore funding for our young people to be able to get home was the same amount of money they paid Joe Flacco to be on the side of a bus. And we spoke out about that. I was at every single education rally that was held by Build and every other organization. We fought like crazy with a young council, with an energetic council, and we fought like crazy. I mean, we to say we don't work is unbelievably not true. And I think it's a matter of paying attention. I think it's a matter of locking in. I can't control what the media reports or does not report. So if they don't want to show me in an alley every Friday because that's not going to be what sells, then I can't control that. If I was here late today because I was at a rec council meeting in my district making sure that we got funding for the Beachfield Rec Center. This morning I was at a playground cutting. I mean, we are rocking and rolling, my man. And I would say, if you're going to call me out, I'm going to take it. But if not working is not what I do. I'm sorry. I'm not going to I'm not eating that one.
Okay, let me just say this, though. Let me just say this. Because if we're looking for ways to change what we disagree with, then we have that as the topic of our discussion. We can find a way to put on the ballot from the grassroots, from the people. We can find a way to put on the ballot those concerns that we can collectively agree need to be changed. This 18 months or better before the 2020 ballot. Mobilize, get with the people that's done it before, find out what the issues are that we can change, and work on it. Because we can look at, and the city council, and I have to say this, some young, progressive, it's brand new, it's not enough. We need to put more there. We need to change how their power is, and we need to push them. But we don't have to wait for them. We don't have to let them take the lead. Even though some of them are taking the lead, let them take the lead, but we can take the lead ourselves. We can do this. We always say, ain't nobody doing nothing about City Hall. Well, here we are. Let's see why we can't do something about it if that's what you want to do. Are there other questions? 'Cause I know I'm running out of time.
I'm kind of like speak to what Eddie just spoke to. What we got to do, we got to demand that those folks that is sitting in City Hall, as part of the council, think like the brother just stated what he did all day long today. We got to demand to get their butts up out their chairs, go in the alley like the young brother said, and get that for the old folk who ain't internet savvy, you understand? And for the young folk who's too busy, and get down there and give them a handout. Let them know this is what's going on tonight in your neighborhood. I think in terms of when we did the work down Gilmore, all of a sudden the housing authority felt like the basketball court has been in disarray for 20 years that shouldn't be built by people who wanted to build it. And the kids, the gang guys, y'all speak of, came and demand that they went to basketball court. They called a recess and never came back, and now Gilmore got a basketball court. You got the man to get their butts up and go down in the hood or the alley, as the brother spoke, and get the peoples involved.
Okay, is there any other questions? You got a question over here?
So I think a lot of what's been talked about is what people can do. I work in the medical field, and a lot of the people I work with don't have the time and privilege to kind of organize, right? They're worn out by all the things that have been hit with life. And so I totally appreciate what community organizing means in the political process, but could you speak a little bit to what may happen legally speaking to, the University of Maryland Medical System's president? What's the repercussions for that going to look like? Is it just they get let go, or if a kid in Baltimore can get, a record for stealing something, why can't a president? And so can you talk about a little bit of that, like what's likely to be possible and how likely it is and what are the challenges in holding them really accountable and putting the fear of God in them?
Sure. Well, of course, it's all ultimately up to law enforcement who gets charged and who doesn't. We do know that there are, the FBI and the IRS and many others are looking into this case. We know that the medical system has received subpoenas for evidence, documents, testimony. We know there's a federal grand jury impaneled. Ultimately, I don't know who will be charged, if anyone will be charged. It's very possible no one will be charged with anything. So, I don't really know how citizens or even the media can cause people to be charged. That's really up to law enforcement. All we can do is try to expose ethical questions and wrongdoing as we see it, and then let we have no power to charge anyone with anything. So as for citizens, I think, again, you can use public pressure, and I think actually public pressure is an incredible way to get things done. Almost everything I've seen in life that was accomplished came from public pressure. If you want to see these charter reforms passed, if you put public pressure, it's going to happen. It definitely will. And if you demand that the CEO resign or whatever else, and there are protests outside his office, that can definitely happen. So anyway, yeah, I don't really have a good answer for why some people get charged with crimes and others don't. It's really outside of my power, but yeah.
My name is Charmony Pierce. I work at the Real News Network.
And I have a question for Luke and, of course, for the city councilor as well. One of the issues that seem to be clearly articulated here is access to civil engagement requires information. The councilman said that, you know, it's available this day and age with internet and so on, information is available. Obviously, people here are saying that information is not easily accessible and available for the civic engagement that's required, whether it's interventions at the committee levels or learning about where the hearings are taking place as far as the police is concerned. Public engagement needs to be facilitated. At the very least, it needs to be made available using many sources of media. This is where we come into play. We try to make this information available to people, a venue to ask questions. But I think also as media, we can play a role in making that civic engagement more fluid, and that by making information available. So here at The Real News, we will make a commitment to whatever the city councilor could facilitate in terms of information by way of when the committees are taking place, what the agenda of the committees are, and how to participate, how to register, because it's not like somebody can come to City Hall and the doors are going to open and they're going to be able to come in. I understand that it's difficult for people even get in the door, let alone participate. So here at The Real News, as far as our Baltimore Bureau is concerned, if the city councilor would send us some information about how this information, how people can engage, we can make that available to the public. And I'll recommend and advise Luke for you to also take this issue to your newspaper and ask that your editors also make what is happening at City Hall, or even Annapolis for that matter, clearly available, so that people have a place to go, not just where the best restaurants are, what you can do with your kids on the weekend, but how can you publicly exercise your citizenry, your civil engagement, and where you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we try very hard to make sure that the public is aware of everything we can possibly make them aware of. I think about when I'm in Annapolis covering voting sessions that are not announced to the public and are done really never put on the public schedule. Unlike the city council, where every single meeting is on the public schedule on their website, in Annapolis, voting sessions will be announced informally, and then they'll go to a side room and vote. And I make sure I track them down, tweet out where they are, what the vote totals are, and I try to stay on top of all that stuff. So we think that's very important. And one thing I would note, to give some credit to The Real News, as well as us, is Stephen Janis, Taya Graham, and I, one time, several years ago, were kept out. We were locked out of a meeting where they were voting for huge subsidies for the Harbor Point development, and they kept it behind closed doors. We tried to get in the meeting. They barred the media. We filed a joint complaint to the Open Meetings Board, and the city solicitor wrote against us. You know, I'm not a lawyer. I wrote this complaint. The city solicitor wrote the other side. The Open Meetings Compliance Board ruled for us, said the meetings have to be open, and now all Board of Finance meetings where TIFs and public subsidies are awarded to developers have to be open to the public. So that's an important step, I think, that journalists have taken to try to make sure these meetings are in fact open.
And you have my commitment. I teach a Civics 101 class in my district. I teach a community academy in my district. Before I ran for office, I was a community organizer. Before I ran for office, I was on the picket line in front of City Hall. So I know exactly what it's like to be on both sides of the train tracks. And I also know that change does not happen without the power of the people, which is why I teach a civics class, because I go into community meetings all the time and people don't know the difference between a council member, a delegate, a senator, a congressman. I get all kinds of titles in any given day. And for me, that I'm not blaming the public for not knowing that information, but I also know that if we really want to make systemic change in the city of Baltimore, everybody needs to know what their council person is supposed to be do. Everyone is supposed to know what the power of the mayor is and the president and the comptroller and what these roles are. It is not acceptable that people don't know this. And the fact that it's not taught in schools is a problem. Yes, you should know what Congress, how the houses of Congress operate, but you should also know how your city council operates. And that's something that we should be teaching young people. So if the Real News would like me to come on and do my civics class, I'm happy to do it. There is really, I have no, because most of the, yeah, sign me up. I'm on TV. I will come and do it. If somebody, I'll be here for a little bit afterwards. I'm happy to break down the committee process. I mean, for me, a lot of the things I've been able to accomplish in the 2.5 years I've been on the council have been because of the support of outside groups, because of the United Workers, because of the labor movement, because of education advocates, that we've been able to get some very progressive things done. It's when we don't have the support of the public or people shining the spotlight that things that the progressive group, the progressive members of the council want to see happen end up dying, because it's easier to kill something in the darkness than when the light is shining on it.
Okay, okay, I see two hands. I guess we're gonna go a little over, but let me just say this. How many people here think that they can help put in a referendum? How many people here think that they want to get involved in changing something in this city? Is there anybody in here that feel like that? I understand time is tight. Okay, I see a number of hands. What I would do if you got in touch with Jessel Noor, he's not here now, so I'm putting this on him. If you get in touch with Jessel Noor, with Jessel at the Real News, and send your name up, and then maybe he can make the connection to get a number. I've seen a half a dozen or more hands go up. Maybe he can help put y'all together so that then y'all can talk to people that's done already did this and maybe move forward with it. That's something we need action. We just don't need to be sitting here talking, and we are talking, but we also need to start thinking in terms of taking action. So Jessel at the Real News, or okay, I'll take the bullet. Eddie at the Real News, send your name, information, and I'm gonna try to see if we can't connect you. Okay, so we're running a little over time, so just kind of bear with us.
Okay, I just have a quick question for you. I just need something clarified. Now, you say that the state of Maryland is actually responsible for the police, right? Okay, so how does that work? Is it a partnership between the city and the state as far as the funding for the police department, or is it strictly on the city of Baltimore to pay for the police department, but yet have no control over it?
I think you got it. So we foot the bill. We stroke the check every year, but we have no way to hold them accountable. We have a public safety committee on the council that I'm a part of, and we hold hearings every single month. And one of my colleagues, Ryan Dorsey, tweeted out, this is what we're holding this group, this entity accountable. One of the largest expenditures in the city budget, one of the biggest impacts of the city of Baltimore, but we're the ones holding the monthly hearings, but can't pass any legislation impacting their operations. Why isn't the city delegation holding monthly oversight hearings on the police department? So we just had state elections. They will be back up in 2022. Ask your delegates and senators, why is the city delegation not having monthly oversight hearings over the Baltimore Police Department when they are a state agency?
Okay. All right, one last question. Oh, wait, okay, last two questions. Okay, all right, okay. All right, not the last question then. All right, get this lady down here in the end first because she's got a question. Okay.
This is not a question. I just want to give some information to people. Please go right on the web to the U.S. Justice Department the 2016 Justice Department report on the Baltimore City Police Department. Everything is in there, including the fact that the state is in charge. Yes, we foot the bill here, but the state is in charge, and it's a 166-page report. It was, quote, a damning report. Please read it, citizens of Baltimore, citizens of the state of Maryland. It is important that you read it and you know exactly what happened, what's going on, and supposedly there's a consent decree. I don't know how that's going, but just read the report.
All right, thank you. Okay, we got questions. I'm not even going to try.
Wait.
There's a question here, and
Do you want to
I-
ask people
I'm-
what we're going to report on next time? That's important. Are we,
Yeah,
we're
I
gonna
know,
let it
but
go?
look, I don't want to get attacked. So we're gonna take these questions.
Hello, my name is Penelope Blackwell. I'm the editor-in-chief of the MSU Spokesman. And I'm curious to know what's the best way, and this is directed toward the community advocates. A large amount of the population at Morgan are not registered voters, but they want to be involved. What is the best form of action for them to do that?
What's the best way for them to get registered?
No, to get involved.
Well, I mean, for one, people do need to register to vote, and to get involved is free. I will say that a lot of times GOTV, Get Out the Vote money for organizations, that money doesn't come until a couple of months or a couple of weeks before elections. So if you are organizing on campus, do some voter registration drives. Make sure that you have somebody, like I said, have a designated person who can come to city council meetings during legislative session, have a designated person or team who can go to Annapolis, and then have meetings on campus at times that are convenient for you where you can give report backs on what's going on. There is the Charm City Television and places where you can watch the legislative process on television. Have watch parties on campus so that you all can hang out on campus, have some popcorn and some pizza, and you can all watch the legislative process together. And then after it's over, you can talk about what you just heard. And if you have questions, now you have something that you can follow up on. So, I mean, it can be difficult to get involved, but when all of a community works together, it actually can become a whole lot easier. But voting, to get registered to vote is free. The Board of Elections is right across the street. You can go pick up ballots. They do trainings for people so that you can be an authorized to register other people to vote. That can happen year round. Unfortunately, organizations that have staff that needs to be paid, if we're waiting for money to be able to do get out the vote efforts, we have to wait till the last minute. But year round, people can get registered to vote.
So what about the students who are registered to vote in other states, other than just contributing to conversations and things like that? What can they do to see change that they're contributing to?
Well, I would urge them to register in the state that they go to school at, because the resources that are providing for their school, so, you know, the places that they're eating, where they're staying, the quality of their education, that's all being determined locally. So I would be an advocate for them to register to vote here. You can always change your voter registration status. So if you're at school, register to vote here. And once you go back home, then register to vote there. A lot of people tend to stay where they go to school at anyway. So go ahead and get on top of it and just register to vote here. We appreciate you for participating. Yeah.
I would just, I think what Nabia said is super, go ahead and clap. What Nabia said is super important. Of course, voters are literally tasked with being engaged in decision-making in the city, but I also think for folks who aren't registered to vote or can't register to vote here in Baltimore, you don't have to be a registered city voter to call your council person. You don't have to be a registered city voter to go to City Hall. And you don't have to be a registered city voter to collect petition signatures for a ballot initiative.
Okay, look, hopefully I can, is this not for the councilman? Oh, okay, all right. All right. I just didn't want to get into the fight anymore. All right. This is the last question, or I'm gonna not be allowed back in RBs.
Well, since we in Baltimore City is like, high crime, bad education, homicides, unemployment, healthcare issues, overdose issues. The question is, do you think Baltimore is going through gentrification?
Oh, that's for anybody on the council. Anybody want to answer that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we think so. It's happening now. It's been happening
All
for
right.
decades.
Okay. All right. I got to go. Bye. Thank you. Thanks for coming, and thank the panel. All right.